This is Uncle Mark from the How-to-Heretic podcast. Say hello, Uncle Mark.
What's going on, Dan? How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I am so glad you are here. And I wanted to ask first if you could just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, let people know just in case they don't know what the podcast is.
Yeah, totally. So I am I'm one third of a podcast called the How-to-Heretic. And we are a post-religion, or I guess leaving religion curious and / post-religion podcast about, various religious topics, but really what we aim, the audience we're kind of aiming this at are people who are just beginning this really crazy journey, and that many of us have been on. So my podcast partners, Dan and Doug and myself, are all ex-Mormons who grew up in Salt Lake City. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's a cool religion. If anybody's interested, I can send a couple guys around your house probably in the next 20 minutes.
I've seen it around. I've seen quite a few bicycles around, at least.
It's catching on. It's totally catching on. So that's our podcast, and we've been on the air for about a year, and we've been having a great time. And so anybody who's got particular Mormon questions or issues, I'm rarely qualified to talk about that stuff.
Yes. So just to emphasize, Uncle Mark is an ex-Mormon. So I would love it if we could have callers talking in about Mormonism or ex-Mormonism or those kinds of topics. But you are free to call in about any kind of topic you want, where we can either ask you questions about what you believe, or you can ask us questions about what we believe and how we got to those beliefs. The show phone number is on the screen, as you can see if you're watching at home. If you're listening to this from the podcast, obviously you don't have to worry about that, so don't worry. So Uncle Mark, your show also doesn't just cover ex-Mormon stuff. I mean, you guys talk about all kinds of things. I know I've listened to it myself. You've got essential oils. You're talking about religions from Eastern cultures and stuff. Recently, you were talking about circumcision, which was kind of cool. I mean, you guys really just run the gambit.
Yeah, totally. We try to, we try to put a critical eye on all of it. I mean, one of them is not really that much dumber or worse than the others as far as its kind of belief systems. Some are way more dangerous and toxic because of what they do in the world. But I think it's really good for people who are beginning their journey out and want to begin to learn how to think critically, to do kind of comparative religion stuff, right? To go, hey, let's talk about the Moonies. Let's talk about the Church of God with Signs Following, the snake handlers. And I think it's fun and it's kind of funny, but it also really helps people kind of triangulate where their faith is in a constellation of ideas, right?
Absolutely.
And they're all just things. Ideas are something you should be completely unafraid to discuss and look at critically.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is, again, a show about talking about ideas, and I love what you guys do with your show in the sense that you're always willing to talk about stuff with an open mind for the most part. I mean, you crack some jokes, right? I mean, some of this stuff is pretty silly, but you're always willing to give something the best case. And I think that's what all of us should really strive to do. We should say, hey, let's look at this with a good faith in mind, right? And see what we can come up with, see what we agree with, see what we disagree with, and see how we reach our conclusions, which is really great. I'm sorry, I'm cracking up over here because I'm looking at the picture that we've chosen for you to represent as your avatar, I suppose. For the audio listeners at home, they're not going to be able to see it, but maybe you can shed some light on why we picked this image here and what it is.
Well, I wish they wouldn't be so cruel. I have a glandular problem, right? It's all my endocrine system, and I feel most comfortable on this stick. So stop it, haters.
Yeah, it's. I gotta say, you're looking very good for someone your age.
Thank you.
You know, it's. I've definitely seen worse, right?
I should talk a little bit about my avatar there. So this is, I think, in episode 9 of our show. Uncle Doug, who was a Mormon missionary, he was the only one of us that actually went on a Mormon mission. He did an examination of the Old Testament book of Leviticus, which is pretty hilarious. But buried in Leviticus, and I didn't know this was in it, is a prohibition against eating weasels.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the word weasel was in the Bible for some reason just broke my brain. I laughed so hard. And then the weasel kind of became part of our little show culture until we ended up buying this little creature off of eBay. And a very kind listener, he's not wearing it right now because it's Casual Friday, but a listener made him a Pope hat. So he's now Pope Leviticus the Forbidden. So he'll be standing in for me tonight.
Pope Leviticus the Forbidden. I love it.
Yes.
It's so good. It's so good. I didn't realize when you first sent me that image to use, I forgotten that that's an actual weasel that you own in your house.
Yeah.
That's somewhere that you put publicly, I imagine, which, good for you.
It's in our studio.
Yeah.
It's amazing what's available on eBay. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. We were, we were talking a little bit before the show, and we were kind of talking about something interesting because for those of you who watch the show, I've had Bryce Blakenagel on, and I've made some appearances on some other ex-Mormon shows as well, and I've had conversations with other ex-Mormons, and I've come to this realization that, ex-Mormon culture and atheist culture, I guess if you want to use those terms, are kind of different in a lot of ways, and they don't always actually mix. And like, for example, there's a lot of ex-Mormon podcasts for some reason. I don't know what it is, but you guys, you run the podcast business pretty well.